Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Automation through APIs with the new UiPath Integration Service session. This is the last session of Tech Integration Series 3. And please keep in mind that next week we are going to launch Tech Integration Series 3. This is the last from Series 2. And in the end, we will present you the upcoming sessions from the Tech Series 3. Let's see who we have with us today. So today's team is, of course, I am the host, like Christina Vidu, Regional Community Manager for EMEA. And our speaker today is Brandon Brown, Senior Director for Technology Alliances at UiPath. And our host from Technology Alliances, Lynette York, Principal Technology Alliances Manager with UiPath. We also have in the call with us our Regional Community Manager for Americas, Diana Gray. So at any time throughout the session, feel free to use the chat because you have support from UiPath in the chat throughout the session. Some house rules for today's meeting. This will last almost an hour, the session with Q&A, so we will try not to go over an hour today. I'm sorry for keeping you on mute, but you are encouraged to network and share your LinkedIns in the chat box and also interact with each other. We usually do networking for LinkedIn profiles if you want to connect with peers. We apologize for keeping you on mute. We will do this until the Q&A time, and we do this for the sessions where we expect many attendance all the time. But we will use the chat and you will be able to place all the questions in the chat. We will confirm receiving them, we will take them, and we will reply them in Q&A. So every question will be addressed in Q&A, and what we can address, we will also address in chat. So feel free to contact us for chat at any time throughout the session. We hope you are here to also have some fun today because we have, of course, a Menti quiz coming up in 2 sessions throughout the meetup. In the middle and at the end. So pay close attention to Brendan's presentation because you will have 4 questions addressing the content and the UiPath swag prize at the end. We hope you will pay attention and learn a lot of things today and also have some fun. Please use the chat, and now I will hand it over to Brendan to start presentations. Thank you all for coming and joining us. Brendan, you can share the screen.
Okay, let me share now. All right, let me know if you can't see it, but we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so thanks again, everyone, for joining. We got a lot to cover today, so we're just going to dive right into it. So again, this session is really around the new integration service for Automation Cloud. And so why did we do this? When we look at, integration needs out there, there's clearly a proliferation of a lot of different systems. Average number of enterprise applications is over 175 for a given organization. And that, poses an automation challenge to, how do we automate across those different systems? What are the ways in which we want to automate those things, whether it be API-based or UI-based? So really, this is the core problem we're trying to solve, is to how do we span these different systems and give you different ways and approaches to ultimately automate across those different systems. And so this is really where we're trying to combine the best of 2 worlds. We've got UI, which is really UiPath has been the leader for quite some time, but really we want to bring in API-based capabilities as well. And while we've always been able to do this, really with this release, we're really focusing on the ability to scale this and also to make this more uniform across the entire stack. So really want to combine the best of UI automation as well as API automation, so you have a choice in terms of how you want to accomplish these automation needs. And the way we've done that is we went and acquired a company called Cloud Elements that's really been a leader in around providing integration capabilities to other platforms. And we've rapidly adopted that to this. So this acquisition took place earlier this year. And with 21.10, and this is really where we're bringing that first release to market. And we're super excited to bring these capabilities, but we're just getting started. This is kind of the first wave of some of the capabilities we'll bring, but we have a lot planned between now and the end of the year and next as well. We'll definitely cover some of that. So that acquisition has really turned into this new service through the integration service. Again, unlocking a lot of the power of APIs that you can do across many different systems. And when we look at, what does this service offer, at least with this in the release, is a really large, robust library of connectors. This is something that we're going to be adding every single month and continuing to enhance that catalog, but we want to make sure that you're connecting to the systems that you use every day. We also want to simplify those connections. So how do you authenticate? How can I do this? Do I always need to create client ID and secrets for pieces? Or can I just use my username and password and get connected quickly? So the way we create those connections and manage connections is a key part of the service. But we've also recognized that, while we always want to have the ability to have a robot go out to a different system and call those APIs, what about things that happen in those systems? What about events or triggers that happen, like an update in SAP or a new incident in ServiceNow? We want to be able to respond to those by authoring triggers so that we don't have to create robots to go monitor those systems for us. We could just simply create a trigger and we'll take care of it for you. We've also wanted to simplify the design. So when you look at Studio, Studio X, and other design canvases, we want to make sure that there's a consistent experience on how you're using integrations across that. And then we also wanted to kind of make sure, again, that we can use these interchangeably. There may be times you still want to use UI-based automation, totally fine. You might want to mix and match that with API-based automation. So again, be able to use those within a single workflow is key. And then around that, we want to make sure we provide governance around this. So when we look at how we manage those connections, author those connections, we want to really give you the ability to look at this centrally and manage these connections centrally as well. Right, so this kind of gives us a really unique integration approach overall, where kind of in the top right, where we have these new integration service activity packs. So you'll notice that there will be a new namespace. So it'll be like UiPath dot, whatever the connector name is, dot integration service dot activities, and all those are the new dedicated activity packs related to this new service. And as I mentioned before, be able to do those triggers with those systems, and this will be related to these connectors, and I'll definitely spend some time on that. But also know that we also have these UiPath connectors. These are more native apps that live in different platforms to be able to talk to UiPath. And also from a roadmap perspective, even though we have a robust catalog on these integrations, we want to make sure that you can build these yourself, whether it's within your own organization, or if you're a business partner or an SI and you want to be able to build this on behalf of your clients, we want to make sure that you're able to build these and expand the catalog for your own use as well. All right, so let's kind of bring this to life and look at an example. Let's say we've got Emma. Emma creates a new record in Workday. And, so how did we want to kick off an automation when a new employee gets created in Workday. So how did we do this before, right? We had to, create a robot. Perhaps we scheduled that robot to go check a particular record within Workday. And then if something was added, then we want to kick off another automation. But this is really where triggers can come into play, where I can just set up the trigger. I don't have to create a whole robot process to do that for me. And then and only then we can kick off a process that's going to be responsible for the onboarding process itself. So perhaps this new employee is in sales, so we want to be able to provision a new user in Salesforce. We might want to be able to create a service request in ServiceNow to make sure they got a laptop and all their equipment and access. And we also might want to go and use traditional UI-based automation to go and fill out a training request so that the new employee gets trained. And then kind of wrap this up and notify the hiring manager and key folks, these key steps along the way. So this is kind of mix and matching how triggers come into play, how API-based automation and UI-based automation could be all interchanged to kind of address a whole complete solution. Right, so let's kind of look at the architecture at a high level and a more detailed level. So when we look at the integration service, the big difference between how it was before and now, again, because we've always been able to do some level of API-based automation, is it was all done within the robot itself. Meaning I drag and dropped an activity and I configured that activity. I would maybe create an OAuth app and put in my client ID and secret as an example. And all that was baked into the activity, as well as the execution. So when the robot ran, all that execution code would be in the activity itself. And with the integration service, we've simplified this, where the actual execution is done on the service, and the activity pack is essentially just a UI to help you configure that. But when the robot runs this, the robot will essentially say, hey, I've got this connector to, let's say, SAP, then I'm going to pass that data from my workflow to that connector. And then the integration service is what's going to be making those API calls to that backend system. So this simplifies a lot of things. It helps us to be able to rapidly deploy and manage these connectors. It helps a lot with authentication and how we manage that authentication on your behalf, and things like token refreshes and the like. And it also allows for, from security perspective, to kind of help govern, who's allowed and what's allowed to access to these scenes, because these API requests will be coming from a central server rather than, a bunch of different robots that could be, spread on across the VMs or desktops. But we take a little bit deeper dive into that architecture. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but a couple of key points is that, these activities, when we design using a particular connector, let's say again, Salesforce, ServiceNow, Workday, or the others, is when we're looking at what those methods and properties or what's available to me, we're going to be going against that integration service, because the integration service will be telling the activity pack, hey, this is what you can integrate with. These are the APIs that are available. These are the properties that are available. And so as we enhance and enrich those connectors, they'll immediately be able to be available to you in the activity pack. So we don't have to republish a new version of the activity pack just to give you more capability. And that's a key piece of our strategy, is to be able to give you more automation without minimizing the impact on those upgrades. And like I mentioned before, when you actually run these things, you'll execute them, and the activity will simply just make that call to the integration service itself and broker those API calls. And then on the triggering side, again, you'll go into Orchestrator, you'll be able to configure and create those triggers. And then behind the scenes, that integration service will have a scheduler for those events, because not every system has webhooks, as an example. And so when we look at those objects, we'll be able to create events on a majority of those types of objects, and we'll handle that scheduling and pulling on your behalf. Right, so now let's kind of pivot back to the activity pack. So there's lots of different approaches on how we work with different systems. And one of those is obviously the scope, and the scope will be able to connect to our, use our connections, which I'll show in a moment. But there's also a couple of different ways, depending upon the system, on how we want to expose that integration to you. Sometimes we'll have what we call business activities, and these are going to be dedicated activities for common operations. So in this example, let's take Slack, creating a channel or inviting to a channel or sending a message are very common things that we want to do in Slack. But the Slack API, literally has over 100 different methods that we could call. So this is us, saying, hey, these are going to be more of the common used ones. We're going to have dedicated activities for those. But there's often times where we want to unlock the power of that API, and some of them will be more object-based. This is going to be more true for line of business systems like Dynamics and SAP and ServiceNow. But this is where you'll see a node called objects, where we have standard CRUD operations plus a couple of different list and search capabilities. And you'll see this on the majority of those activity packs, where CRUD operations and objects just make sense to do. So again, you'll see some common use ones, but you'll always be able to have the ability to kind of get back to the rest of the pieces. And in some systems, may not have objects. They may not have create, update, delete on these particular pieces, but they may just have arbitrary methods. And so you'll see in some of these activity packs what's called an invoke method. And this essentially is just that. It's allowing you to invoke a method from that API that may not fall into a standard CRUD type pattern. So again, these are the different approaches, and you won't see these in all of the connectors. It really depends on which of these approaches make sense for that particular connector. But know that this is going to be a common pattern. So as you work with integrations, you can kind of expect and kind of see the same type of approach and methodology across all the connectors. So now let's switch a little bit to the trigger, and I'll kind of show this live in a minute, where if I want to create a trigger, one of the first things I need to think about is, okay, if I set up this trigger, what process do I want to run, right? So let's take an example of Salesforce. Hey, a new opportunity got created in Salesforce. I want to go and trigger a particular workflow process to run. But then I want to say, okay, I need to prepare that process to do this. So there's not a special process type. I can create a new one. I can just modify one that I already have. But with keep in mind is that we're going to be passing data from that trigger to your process to help your process out. And what you need to do is we'll always have these predefined input arguments that you need to create on your workflow process. And what this will do is then give that process context to the data. And the one specific one I'll call out is this UiPath event object ID. That's going to be the most useful one. Again, coming back to that example is, we have a new opportunity that was in Salesforce that would change from close 1. And so I want the opportunity ID to my process. And so that particular opportunity ID will be passed around in this object ID. So again, just a very simple way to pass some data from the trigger to your process. But great, once you prepped your process, now I want to go set up a trigger to go do that. The first thing I'm going to do is create a connection to that source system. So let's say, again, Salesforce, I log into Salesforce, create my connection, and then I can go and configure the trigger itself. Which connector I'm going to use, what connection I'm going to use, and I can select the event and process that I want to do. So kind of here's a quick screenshot of, and we'll show this live in a minute, of actually configuring that connector. So here I have selected the Salesforce connector. I have my connection that I want to use. The event that I want is when an update, a record is updated. And that record in this example just happens to be a count. So basically this will be firing when when an account record is updated. This is when this trigger will fire. And this is the process that I have selected that will ultimately start. And this will kind of show me my input arguments that are again available to me that will be passing into that process. So again, this is kind of how I'll be able to set up that trigger and pass that data into the process itself. All right, so we're going to kind of show this in a little bit, but when we look at kind of where we're at, a lot of capability coming now and in the near term is we've had a great private and public preview. We've got a ton of feedback. You might have seen this at Forward as well. We've gotten a lot of great feedback since then. We are releasing literally next Monday. So I believe November 2nd, if my calendar is right. So we're releasing this Monday. And at the same time, we'll be releasing this triggers as preview. So general availability for the integration service. So that's connections, that's connectors, those are those activity packs. That's what you can get started and it'll be general available and it's officially supported. The trigger part will start as a public preview with GAing the triggers within December time period. Okay. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be able to expand these kind of capabilities where we want to give you the power to build these connectors. So we'll start a preview program of that in early next year, looking around the mid-year timeframe to GAing that. Hopefully to bring that a little bit sooner, but that's currently roughly the timelines. And then right now, this service is available on Automation Cloud only, but we do want to bring that on-prem, both from the ability to go from cloud and talk to on-prem systems, but also to be able to use the integration service fully deployed on-prem. Right, so we've kind of covered a lot of ground. I want to jump into the product and show you, but before we do that, let's do a little quiz. So I think I'll turn it back over to you to kind of show it, and then we'll drop back into a demo. All right, Christina.
I'm sharing screen now. Okay, so everybody go to menti.com, www.menti.com, and you have this code 32409675. This is the code. We will also share it in the Zoom chat. Let's share it in chat so you can copy paste it from here. Okay, and we'll wait for as many of you as possible to join, but not very long. So there are about 80 people in the session now. Let's see how many of you joined the quiz. So it's easy, just menti.com, and this is the code you'll be using. You have it in chat. You can just copy paste it from the chat box. Come on, I think we can do more. We have 42, 43, we're still going up. Okay, I think we can start now. If anybody wants to join, join quickly. 5 more seconds. Okay, I think that's it. Okay, 5 seconds is gone. So we'll start the quiz now, and let's see. Okay, so now answer fast. Where is the integration service available? automation cloud, orchestrator on-prem, or robot? 20 more seconds to answer, and remember that answering fast gives you more points. So where is the integration service available? Okay. Time's up, and now we will see how many. 39 of you were right. Let's see the intermediate leaderboard to see who is currently leading after this question, and then we'll move fast to the next question. Okay, so we have in pole position now Miguel, right and the fastest. Let's move to the second question to see if we maintain that ranking. Okay, so remember guys, be fast when answering. Where does the integration API execution run? Robot, Studio, Integration Service. So 10 more seconds. Where does the integration API execution run? Okay, time's up. A bit more shared opinions on this one, but I see there is a majority. Let's see the leaderboard now and see where Miguel, apparently something switched. Okay, so we have the overall now leader is Toby. We'll come back to the quiz, guys. We have 2 more questions at the end before Q&A, so just keep paying attention. I will now switch it over again to Brandon. Thank you all for joining the quiz. Okay. Brandon, you can go on.
All right.
I hope you guys had fun.
Yeah, and that last one is a trick question, especially throwing in that robot. Sorry to be sneaky, but all right, let's share this out. Okay, so now let's kind of take some of those concepts we just kind of went through and see this, how this really works and comes together. So one of the first things you'll see is potentially a new option for integration service. Now, to see that option, it should be enabled by default, but know how you enable or see that service is just like other services. So you'll go in under admin, you'll see your particular tenant, and for that tenant, you can go to tenant settings, and you will see integrations. This is actually get renamed to integration service, but you'll see that new option here. And again, it should be enabled by default, but this is where you can turn it off or re-enable this at the tenant setting level. So ensuring that we have the integration service, which I do, because it's on the left-hand nav here, is one of the first things you'll see is a list of connectors. And again, you will see continue updates every month. We'll be adding these, right after even next week, we're adding a few more. So this catalog will be growing rapidly. Our goal is to have roughly around 70 by the end of the year and rapidly expanding as we go into next year. But when you look at these particular connectors, I can come in and click on any one of these and add a particular connection, read a little bit more about it, get a link to documentation. But one of the things I want to do here is I'm going to go ahead and go into connections, and I can see a list of all the connections I am using today. And this is where I can come in and then see, hey, when was the last time that I've used it? I can come in here and perhaps check a connection. So like on the ServiceNow, I'm going to say check connection, and that's going to be revalidating the connection that I have. And if there's any issue with my connection, then it'll actually be marked as red, and it will give me an option to fix that connection. So this is kind of a key aspect of this is managing these pieces to kind of be more proactive and making sure these automations are running without having to go to the workflow, open up Studio, design that, republishing those. Again, I can manage these connections, right here. So let's kind of do this from scratch and create a new one. So I'm going to go and do Salesforce, and I'm going to add a Salesforce connection here. And what this is now going to do is take me to Salesforce to log in. Now we have kind of 2 different options on this, depending upon the connector. Sometimes we will register a UiPath app where, again, I'm going to just, within that app, I'm just being prompted to go to the actual line of business system. Again, in this case, I'm going to Salesforce. So I'm going to log in with this particular account. And then it's going to give me a typical OAuth flow where it'll ask me for, or prompt me for, what level of access are we asking for? So it'll give me the different scopes that I need for this particular app. And we always try to do the least restrictive scopes as possible. So we only ask for what we truly need. And that means what the ultimately the activity pack will allow you to do, and these triggers will allow you to do. So I'm going to say allow, and this will now pop me back into my integrations connections list. And now I can see that I've got Salesforce added just a few seconds ago here. So what you'll notice is that this column is default. So you can have more than one connection. So I could add as many Salesforce connections as I want, but only one can be used for default. So I can come in and if I had multiple, I could set that new connection as default. And this will become pretty prevalent, in how and why we use this here in a moment. But what I first want to do is, now that I have this connection to Salesforce, let's go ahead and set up a trigger. So I want to, again, maybe there's some account updates happening in Salesforce, and I want to create a process to go ahead and launch that when new accounts are updated. So what I'm going to first do is I'm going to select the connector that I want to use. So in this case, again, I'm going to do Salesforce. And since it knew that I already have a connection for Salesforce, it went ahead and prompted to that. And again, if I had other options in there, this would be available to me. So this is why we can have multiple connections. And now I can say, all right, well, which record do I want to do? In this case, I'm going to say account. All right, let's search for account. And rather than creating this trigger off a new record, I want to do it when it is updated. And so these event types is really going to be based off of what is available to me. So creating new and updating new is going to be fairly common. Let me just type account. All right, here we go. But really, again, it's going to be based on the source system. And just like I mentioned earlier around activities where we're creating those curated business activities, what are those common pieces? You will also see over time us adding other events. And this is where we're going to start curating more events, because sometimes those source systems can be fairly complex, and maybe the event doesn't give you all the information because we're constrained to what that vendor is providing us. But we have the ability to call these different events and enrich that data to make these events more useful for you. So going above and beyond what, let's say, a ServiceNow or a Google or a Microsoft gives you in their default eventing. So again, look for expansion and adding more of these, over time. All right, so I've got my Salesforce, I got my connection, I got my event. So great, what process do I now want to start? And I already have a pre-published process. I've got this Salesforce account change. But let's take a quick look at that process. So in this process, I've got a couple of, just a switch here because I'm actually having this process handle multiple different types of events, perhaps maybe OneDrive or Salesforce or others in here. But what you notice is down below is where I have those input arguments. And these are the exact names that you want to use to, again, to receive data from that event. So if I want to, use that account ID, since this trigger is being responded to an account, then this UiPath event object ID will give me that account ID in Salesforce. So that way I can use it to do lookups or, get any other data that I need. All right, so this is how you want to set it up. And if I switch back here, this is kind of telling me that these are the input arguments that are there. So great, we have everything that we need. So I'm going to go ahead and add this trigger. All right, so once I add that, that'll now be a list of triggers that I have available to. I can deactivate this, I can come in and remove it. I can, click on it, and see it. So again, you can have, obviously multiple triggers into this. Again, this is preview starting next week. And we're going to be rapidly adding different capabilities to this as well. I'm not going to get into all the roadmap items just yet, but really excited about these two capabilities and definitely encourage you to go check it out. All right, so now we've got our trigger. Now let's take a look at how do we use these connectors within Studio. So I've got another process here, and this is really responsible for orders. So, hey, I've got an order in Salesforce. I want to go ahead and grab that order information, perhaps create a service request within Salesforce, or sorry, within ServiceNow to go ahead and get that order fulfilled. And I might want to get some documents off of Google Drive and email that to the appropriate people, and also go ahead and notify them in Slack. So again, a couple different options on some of the various integrations and connectors that we have here. All right, so now let's take a look at my Salesforce. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into this. And what you'll notice is in the scope activity, and this is true for all integration service related activities, is if I come in here and I can configure this, then it will show me my robot connection and my design time connection. And you can see that it already knew that, say, hey, the user that I'm logged in with within Studio here has a connection to Salesforce. So we just automatically populate that. Again, makes it super easy to use when you're building these automations. You're not having to configure this authorization every single time. We'll just kind of look at to see what you got and use it within design time. Now, right now, these are drop downs that I can't select. This will be done in a future release where I'll be able to, if I have multiple connections, I'll be able to select the connection that I want. That's not going to be here right this release, but very soon we'll be give you the ability to switch those connections. But right now, if I do want to switch that connection, essentially all I need to do is go back to my connections here. And if I had two Salesforce ones, I would just simply set that other connection as default and to tell it, say, yep, that's now the new connection I want to use. All right, so great. I've got my connection already established to Salesforce, so I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then now we'll kind of take a look at how we can want to configure this. And again, you'll kind of see a common pattern here. If I look at Salesforce, Salesforce is very object-based, right? It's a main line of business system. So this is where why we took the approach to have objects and have these CRUD operations plus lists to do that. And so if I were to configure this get record, then again, this is where I already have this selected for the order object. But again, the power of this is I have the ability to look at essentially any object within Salesforce. And this is going to be generally true for just about a lot of the connectors that we have here. So I have the order one, and these are all the properties that are related to order. And this is where I can come in and look at which fields are available to me, map these different fields, and kind of use this throughout my process. One of the other things that we can do here is if I look at, let's say, a list record, maybe I want to be able to look something up. And if I were to configure this list record, same thing, I get to pick the object that I want. And just for a quick example, I'll just use account here. And this is where I can get, again, a list of records. But what's nice about this is I can configure this a little bit. I can set the order by. I can override and if there's any pagination that I want to do and page sizes beyond the defaults, I have the ability to configure that. And what's super cool is that, I can also query this. So, I might want to be able to say, where the, we'll just say, status, equals, open or something like that. So this is where I can put in, SQL-like pieces. And what we're doing as part of the integration service is while some of these platforms offer native search, which we will give you the ability, some are available now and some of them will be coming very soon. But what we're also trying to do is us do the searching for you. So that way you don't necessarily have to know what the query language is for that line of business system. You can just use, general, SQL to do this across any piece. So whether it's, ServiceNow, SAP, Workday, et cetera, to be able to use a simplified query language to be able to provide and filter these things. Again, so that way you don't have to know what that proprietary query language is in that backend system. All right, so I just kind of thought it was a nice feature, so I figured I'd just call that out really quick. All right, so let's go ahead and delete that. Let's go back to my my main workflow. And so now I've got some order information. Now I want to pass that order information into ServiceNow to go ahead and create that service request. So again, just like before, I can come in and I've already have a connection to ServiceNow. So I went ahead and pre-populated that for me. So great. So now when I come in there, let this load and we look at ServiceNow. Again, since ServiceNow is a main line of business system, again, we've taken that same approach where we have CRUD operations based on this. But if I go ahead and configure this insert record, here I believe we're creating an incident for this particular request. And then I can kind of look at and pass in all the inputs that I want, like what's going to be my description, my short description, comments, anything else that I want to be able to access to this. And what's kind of great about this is that, some systems have, a lot of different fields, right? And ServiceNow is definitely one of those where I can come in and say, add multiple fields and search for, let's say, approval. And I say, I want to add that one. And I also want the approval history as well. So I can hit done. And then that will add those 2 additional properties to this canvas. So that's why it keeps it a little bit cleaner, because some of these systems, again, can have, literally over 100 properties. So that way I can quickly search, get what I want. And so that way I'm only seeing what I want to use rather than a giant sea of properties and having to filter through this. What's also nice about this is, let's say if I come in, maybe I didn't want these after all, and I want to come in and test this, sometimes without, if I'm going to create this incident, sure, I could, configure this, publish my workflow, run the robot. But what would be nice is if I can go ahead and quickly test this before I even get to that. Did I pass the right values? Were there any required fields that I missed? Was there any server-side data validation errors from the line of business system you're trying to talk to? So this makes it really nice to be able to configure that and quickly test it to say, with these sample values, to say, hey, is this API call going to work? So I don't have to go through my entire automation just to test to make sure if this incident was being created. Right, so I'm happy with that particular step here. But and now what I can do is maybe go look at Google Drive. So you'll see Google Drive and Outlook both have updated activities. Now, while a lot of these new activity packs will be related to the integration service, Google and Office 365 were updates to those existing activity packs. We really wanted to minimize the impact because these are just highly used activities within the canvas. So you will see that there is an option to be able to select a connection, but if you don't have the integration service enabled or you're not running it for whatever reason, then you'll be able to configure it just like you always have. So both options are always there. Using the integration service or not using the integration service, the activity packs will still continue to work, but it'll give you that option. Another thing to note, and a little kind of a tip, is while this should be enabled by default, perhaps older projects may not. And so if you go into the backstage here under settings, you will see this new option called default to manage connections. You want that to be enabled to yes, if you are using the integration service and you want those connections available to you. If that is not selected, you will not be able to see and get that option for those connections. Okay. All right. So once I have that, again, at that, I'm going to send maybe an email. I want to send a Slack message here. And again, Slack, we took a little bit more hybrid approach where we have some dedicated activities. So if I come in and I look at this, I've got a send message. So clearly, if you're doing Slack integration, chances are you're probably just going to use it to send a message. So we have created that activity dedicated because it's going to be very commonly used. But again, we also have, some CRUD operations because there is a couple of CRUD on objects in Slack. Not many, but there are a few there. But then in this case, now we also have the invoke method. Because since Slack is a service and not necessarily a line of business system where CRUD on objects would make sense, this is where if I come in, let's just make sure my connection is good. Yep, great. I do have a connection on that one for Slack, so I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to drag over my invoke. And again, since Slack doesn't necessarily have a lot of CRUD operations, what they do have is a lot of posts and gets to various different methods, like admin conversation delete, or Teams list, or conversation invite, or conversations archive. Again, some of these may not be very common, but again, we want to unlock the power of that API. So if let's say I want to archive a piece, then great, it's going to expect a body, so it knows what to actually archive and allows me to do that. And so that's kind of why, again, you'll see these curated activities for those common use, CRUD on objects when it makes sense, and invoke to pretty much unlock everything else. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and cancel that. So we've kind of gone through quite a bit. We've created connections, we've kind of created triggers, we've kind of gone through a little bit of design time on this. What I thought I would do is kind of jump back and kind of do a recap and give you a little bit of idea of where we're going with this. So when we look at a roadmap, again, like I mentioned earlier, we've got about 70 of these connectors going to be shipped between now and the end of the year. We've got quite a few coming in next week. Next month, we're adding, I believe around 20-ish more to that, and another in December to kind of get us to that roughly 70 and rapidly expanding throughout next year. But also when we look at connections, what are we planning next? Like I mentioned earlier, when we look at Studio, where we had that default connection, we'll give the ability to select and switch rather than just always being constrained to the default. So that's a big piece. Connection sharing is huge. When you create that connection, it'd be great to be able to share that connection with others. Think of it like a service account type piece. Because right now what happens, let's say if I created that process, right, I had a connection under me. But let's say I shared it with Bob, and Bob now opens up that workflow and he tries to run it, clearly none of those connections are going to be there. So he has to make sure he's got connections created using his accounts and his credentials for that. And that's great for a lot of type of use cases where that makes sense. We want to use the person's own credentials for that. But there's other cases that we want to share those credentials. And so this is coming rapidly in a next release. We also want to support multiple authentication types. So while we have OAuth is pretty common, some connectors or some line of business systems has multiple different options. And so we want to be able to support. So if that's like it's OAuth versus JWT as an example, give you both of those options. Or sometimes like in the Salesforce app, all you had to do is provide your credentials because we as UiPath created a Salesforce app. But what if you want to create your own Salesforce app using your own organization's client ID and secret? And so that's where we'll be able to provide you the choice of using our app or providing your own client ID and secret for your own organization. We also recognize that we want to give administrators more configuration and global view. So while I can see my own personal connections, we want to give some views to the administrative view as well, so you can see all connections by all users. So that's something that's rapidly coming. Since this APIs and license based on consumption is give you more visibility on how you're using these things. Which connectors are you using? How many API calls are you running? That's pretty key. And then obviously we want to give you that on-prem connectivity. Right now it's automation cloud only, but we will be working ways to bring this on-prem next year, both from cloud to on-prem line of business systems, but also to be able to run the entire integration service on-prem as well. All right, so triggers, what are we shipping now and where are we going with this? So again, triggers will be available in preview next week. The support for disconnected triggers, so this is basically you're going in Orchestrator and connecting that. In a future release, we want to bring that directly within the Studio so you can wire up those events right within Studio. But today you're going into Orchestrator and mapping it to the process like I showed earlier. We do support attended and non-production types based on this. And we've got some other options coming in later in this year. The events, like I mentioned, most of them are going to be for record updates and record creates, but we'll be rapidly adding more events to those catalogs as well. And on those events, right now we're polling every 5 minutes. We will add the ability to configure that to bring that down to 1 minute, or you might want to increase it to a larger frequency. But essentially giving you flexibility on when you want to configure these events. All right, so what are we planning next? Like I said, we want to be able to adjust that polling interval. We also want to add webhooks to this as well. We want to give you filtering capability on those events because right now when those events fired, you need to kind of modify, if that's the event that you really want to see within that. but also you want to be able to filter that perhaps ahead of time. All right, we talked about the connected pieces. We talked about webhooks to be able to add that for instant events, and also to be able to help standardize that payload. So making it easier to work with data those events give you to make it easy to work within your process. And one of the key features for this that I mentioned earlier is to be able to filter these events. So very similar to what you saw on the screen earlier, to be able to select your connector in the event. But here, this is now we can, right in line with the trigger, is to filter based on some data or some basic fields here before that process is even fired. So again, I think this will add a lot of great capability and usefulness of those triggers. All right, so one of the last things I'll do to kind of wrap this up is connector builder. So while we're giving you all this ton of connectors and out-of-the-box capability, it's also super important to have you and our business partners to be able to create your own. And so we really want to be able to easily create quality connectors, distribute those however you see fit, and to be able to use this within the rest of the UiPath stack. And we're using this as well. We're actually using our own connector builder in-house, and we're essentially enhancing and making that tool more robust so that way you can use it as well. But again, we want this to be able to rapidly create the catalog with that standardized approach. And we want our technology partners and business partners to create these things as well as others. But also to be able to publish to the community, right? You may want to have a private catalog for this, but you also want to be able to push this to the community and share this with others. And we're not really looking at a heavy skill set here. And while it is technical because you are working with APIs, it's not like building a custom activity pack for any of those of you attempted to do that. This is going to be very specific on what the API is doing. So to be like, import an open API Swagger definition or a Postman collection to get you started. And we'll kind of auto map as much as we can. And if you want to build your own logic or data transformation, you can just use simple JavaScript. But you don't have to worry about the connector itself or the activity packs. We'll generate those scenes for you. All have to do is really focus on what you want that API to do. All right, but again, this is just the start. I know we're just scratching the surface. We got a lot planned with this integration service. Again, we're going to empower the developer community to build more. We're going to build more of that business abstraction, so go beyond just APIs and make consolidate those APIs for more citizen developers. Give you those deployment options for on-prem and cloud, and really allow this integration service to be used throughout the whole product. Right now, it's focused on activity packs for Studio, but when you think of apps, insights, and others, this integration service will give us that central ability to allow you to access these connectors across other UiPath products as well. And again, continually to expand that catalog. So now we're kind of up to time, and I definitely want to have some Q&A. So I'm going to quickly turn it over to Quiz and allow you to kind of answer some questions here. So again, you can go back to Minty with that code, and I will stop sharing.
Those who are already in the Menti room can just stay there. They don't need to re-enter. So we have 48 now. Everybody is still there, so we'll just start then. If nobody else has left the room and rejoins. So this is where we begin with the final leaderboard we had after the second question, and now we'll move on to the third question. Answer fast to get more points. Guys, so do you need a connection to use a connector for design and runtime? Yes, no, option 3. Oh, option 3. Option 3 is not an answer. Just click yes or no. It's just Menti has 3 options for answer. So do not click option 3. That's a bias. Okay. Great. Yeah, so I see most of the people got it right. Let's see the leaderboard. Okay, so yeah, Toby managed to maintain the position. That happens very rarely. Usually after each question, it switches. Let's go to the next. So this is the final question, guys. Pay attention. After this, we'll have the final leaderboard and the quiz winner. And remember, if there is another option answer, just ignore it. Are triggers released in preview or officially released? Officially released or in preview? Five more seconds for this one. And let's see. Good. Yeah, it's about the same number on the correct answer. Let's see the final leaderboard now, since we're running a bit out of time with this one. And now we get the final winner. This is a very rare occasion that someone managed to maintain his position. So Toby, congratulations. Please give me your email address in a separate message in the Zoom chat so I can send you the swag voucher you got as a prize. Congratulations again from all of us. Now we're going to switch over to Q&A, so I'm going to give back the screen to Brandon.
Yeah, I think I'm just looking at the chat and reviewing some of these questions. So Claudia, I'm happy to sorry, Christine, to look at these, or if you have some specific. Otherwise, I do see a few that I can address here.
You also have the document in the Slack, Brandon, if you want.
I do. I see it now. Perfect. All right, how many connectors are all there together? Again, by the end of the year, it'll be about 70. I think at launch, there'll be about 25. November will give us about 48, if I'm not mistaken. And the December will get us to that 70 total. We UiPath eventually support Open API, develop connectors dynamically via Open API. Absolutely, that is via Connector Builder. And a related question that I saw is that Connector Builder preview will start around early next year with release, soon after. But yes, we want to be able to give you that Open API, Swagger, Postman collections, a lot of different options to be able to do that there. What about pricing? This is something that is included for free. You get a certain number of API calls that'll be available to you for a given user or robot. And then you'll be able to buy API bundles. And we're making it easy that when you buy an API bundle, you can use it however you want. By users, by robots, really doesn't matter. It's going to be at the organization level, and you'll be able to distribute that and use that however you like. Last question here I saw around on the on-prem or promoting from environments for, let's say, dev to UAT to prod, is yes, each environment will need to have that connection. So that way you're in development, you can use your dev instance of that. But then if you have a production connector or connection set up in your production environment, then it'll just automatically pick it up. Because again, these connectors will just look to see, do I have a connection related to that connector for me? And if so, it's just going to pick that up, and that'll be the one that it uses within that environment. Let's see, looking at other questions here. Do we need to upgrade the integration service for on-prem or separate installation? This will be when integration service is available on-prem, which it will be available later next year. Then that will be it won't be a separate install. It'll be it'll come as part of Service Fabric. So if you're familiar with Service Fabric, our ability to that'll be the key mechanism to bring a lot of our cloud capability down to on-prem, and integration services following that same approach through Service Fabric. And I think those are it that I see here. I think with that, we're just about at time. I guess can share up my screen on the future sessions here, because we do have quite a bit coming up related to this topic. So while this was more focused on the core service, we're going to start taking deeper dives into other connectors. So again, we talked about the service overall, but then we'll start breaking this down into other different categories. So on November 4th, we'll be talking about different ITSM systems like ServiceNow, doing a deeper dive of what we could do with the integration service for things like ServiceNow. We also want to do this for Jira. So we'll be doing a deeper dive with integration service around use cases and examples for Jira. That's going to be November 11th. And going into these other pieces here. Did I copy? Okay, here we go. Here's the ITSMs. We got Jira. AWS, so for contact center specific, so this isn't necessarily related to the integration service, but what we're doing around AWS. We kind of come back to the integration service with CRM systems. So we'll be talking everything from Salesforce, ServiceNow, Act. We've got a ton of integration to all kinds of different CRM systems. So we're going to be kind of bundling that out, talking about use cases and some of the API options across those different CRM systems. December 9th, we'll do Oracle e-business suite. Oracle is a whole beast by itself. Also is just like SAP is. So we'll be doing a deep dive on Oracle e-business suite. And then we got to look at SAP Solution Manager. So those would be general integrations, not necessarily integration service related, but really looking at what our options are around SAP Solution Manager. So a ton of different automation capability here across the different systems, a lot of great sessions coming up. So if there's something that is of interest to you, I definitely encourage you to register for those. So I guess with that, Christina, I'll turn it back over to you, but I really appreciate everyone's time. Hopefully this was useful for you.
Okay, so I think you can stop sharing screen a bit now. So yeah, okay. So we'll go back to this. So Brandon already told you all about the upcoming sessions we have, and I also gave you the links in the chat for any of you who wish to RSVP now for the upcoming Tech Series 3. You have all the links for the EMEA and APAC events there, and also the entire series on the Bitly link. I think both links actually contain the entire series, so you can just check it for 12 or 13 p.m. GMT. That's the first link you have if you want to join the EMEA and APAC sessions from Tech Series 3. Thank you all for joining today. Thank you for your participation.